Hello and welcome to this new episode of Not So Fast. In this video we are going to discuss the concept of voltage, and I'm going to start by telling you about a personal anecdote about the concept and how I was wrong about it. The anecdote starts with me as an enthusiastic second-year student in physics, when I had just learned about semiconductors. The conducting behavior of these materials is best characterized by considering two kinds of mobile charge carriers, one positive and one negative. Like some athletes, these materials can be doped. One then distinguishes p-doped semiconductors, which have a surplus in positive charge carriers, and n-doped semiconductors, which have a surplus in negative charge carriers. Now bear in mind that these materials are electrically neutral, and therefore these surpluses in charge carriers need to be compensated by a corresponding background of fixed charges. What starts to be fascinating is when these materials are brought together into what is called a p-n junction. The charge carriers from both sides are free to roam in both materials. Consequently, charge carriers that are in majority in one material tend to diffuse preferably into regions where they are in deficit, in the same way that a drop of ink is going to spread in water. In addition to that, positive charge carriers can annihilate with the negative counterpart. It's a bit as if they were each other's antiparticles, giving off energy as they were combined. Take for example this positive charge diffusing from the p region into the n region and annihilating with a negative charge. As it does so, it leaves a charge deficit of -1, in the p region in particular, and a charge surplus of +1 in the n region. This charge gradient will give rise to an electrostatic field which is going to oppose this diffusion process. As particles diffuse and annihilate on either side of the interface, they create an ever greater electric charge gradient and its corresponding electrostatic field. Eventually, the system reaches an equilibrium situation with no flow of charge occurring and the presence of a central region devoid of charge carriers, called the depletion region. In this equilibrium situation, there is a clear electrostatic potential difference between the two ends of the depletion region. This system can then be used as a diode in electric circuits. So of course I was very excited after these lectures on p-n junctions, and I think a few weeks after that I met with an acquaintance of mine who was an electrician by training. And so I told him, wow, look, this is fantastic. If you've got a p-n junction, actually you've got a potential difference between the two ends. So I think in my mind it was something like a small battery, because you've got a potential difference. In principle, you could try to harvest this voltage and make it work. But then he said, no, there is no electrostatic potential difference. And then to show it to me, he had various circuit elements in his basement. So he came with a diode, and I think it was a genuine p-n junction diode, and then a voltmeter, and that was simply that, right? One diode and voltmeter, and then he actually put the the two wires, and then he showed that there was 0 voltage at the two ends. So of course I was very confused by it, and it showed to me that my understanding of voltage was incorrect. And in particular, if I trusted the theory that I had been told, then there could be 0 voltage but non-zero electrostatic potential difference. And we are going to try to understand why in what follows. To understand what is voltage, let's try to understand how voltage is measured in the first place. To this end, we consider a dipole element of a circuit, basically a part with two ends. We further require that this dipole element is such that at its two ends there are two kinds of forces. On the left end, there is a force repelling electrons, while on the right end there is a force attracting electrons. The nature of these forces can be chemical, electromagnetic, or thermodynamical. One operational way to define voltage is to join two conducting plates to the two ends of the dipole via conducting wires. Because the right end is attracting an electron, it is going to attract electrons from the plate, thereby leaving a positive charge in their stead. This process occurs for multiple electrons and positively charges the upper plate. Likewise, the left end has a force repelling electrons. Electrons are then pushed away to the bottom plate and remain there. As the process continues, the bottom plate becomes negatively charged. Now, although these charging processes were shown one at a time here, they actually occur simultaneously. Eventually, an equilibrium situation is reached where the electrostatic force generated by the plates balances the attracting and repelling forces of the dipole. At that point, the top plate is at a fixed electrostatic potential, and so is the bottom plate. Their difference, called voltage, can be measured by passing, for example, an electron beam in between the plates and observing by how much it is deflected on a screen. This is how an oscilloscope works. Note that this procedure is totally oblivious to the nature of the forces occurring at the two ends of the dipole, and that is what makes it so versatile for electrical measurements. Okay, so now that we understand that we can assign a voltage to the two force-bearing ends of a dipole, we can try to make an analogy where the conducting wire is represented as the slope of a mountain, where the top of the mountain corresponds to the lowest electrostatic potential and the bottom of the mountain corresponds to the largest electrostatic potential. As an electron moves from one side to the other via the wire, it is actually moving downhill in potential energy. We can try to use this understanding of voltage to inform our understanding of another concept of electricity called the electromotive force, or EMF for short. So take some dipole again that I represent here with a cogwheel whose two ends are connected by a wire with some circuit elements in the middle. As before, owing to the voltage, electrons are going to move downhill from one end of the dipole to the other. Now, if one wants to sustain an electric current flowing through the circuit, going downhill is not enough. We need a form of elevator, so to speak, to bring back the electron at the top of the mountain again. That is precisely what the cogwheel is going to do. This current sustaining process is what is called the EMF, and its magnitude is exactly equal to the total potential drop in the circuit. Alright, so now we see that what voltage measures is connected to the actual forces which have very different kinds of origin that occurs within the actual circuit. And so this can shed light a little bit on our problem in my anecdote. The thing here is that it seems that we had an electrostatic potential within the diode, but somehow no forces occurring within the diode. So we'll try to understand just a little bit, very fast to understand why that is the case. Let's start first by mentioning that conductors and semiconductors are part of a larger class of systems called n-body systems. These are incredibly complex systems to understand, and even today having a full comprehension of their behavior is an active research program in theoretical physics and theoretical chemistry. For the present case, it is enough to say that not all electrons are equal in these systems. The negative charge carriers represent electrons that can flow under an applied force. For semiconductors, the positive charge carriers represent electron vacancies that can also flow under applied force. Now, the elephant in the room is what constitutes an applied force in these systems. Well, because these systems comprise many particles, they are subject to thermodynamic forces. At fixed temperature, one could reasonably expect an electron to flow in the direction of decreasing chemical potential. If you think of the chemical potential as the effective energy of an electron in a sea of other electrons and nuclei, then we are just saying that electrons try to decrease their energy. Coming back to our p-n junction, if we plot the electron chemical potential alongside the electrostatic potential, just after making the junction, it would look like this. Here I call μ0 the chemical potential in absence of external electrostatic potential. As you can see, moving towards decreasing chemical potential is going to drive the electrons to move leftward, as we already explained earlier. As charge carriers move and recombine, however, an electric charge gradient appears and the electrostatic potential is not uniform anymore. This tends to decrease the difference in chemical potential between the two sides. As this process continues, a stage is reached where the electron chemical potential is completely flat, and there is no region of decreasing energy the electrons can flow to. In terms of what we have said before, there is no more driving force acting on the electrons. This can then explain what seemed to be a strange situation, where there is a clear electrostatic potential difference between the two ends, but no force acting on the electrons at either of these two ends. Problem solved. So the take-home message is twofold, I think. So the first take-home message is that we always learn when we interact with people who are not in our discipline, because they can provide basically a totally different perspective about a problem. And this often leads us to enrich our understanding and deepen our understanding about a given problem. In this particular case, I actually benefited from this experience because it made me reflect much more deeply about the concept of voltage and electrostatic potential. Now, in terms of physics, the take-home message is that electrostatic potential is not voltage. Okay, and so you can have an electrostatic potential difference inside the material, and yet, or in between two ends of a portion of circuit, and yet no voltage whatsoever. And likewise, anything else that could bring about a flow of electrons, in principle, on its own, in vacuum or something, is not enough to infer that there is necessarily corresponding voltage. So you need really to work out what are all the mechanisms by which electrons are going to move. And for that reason, I think electrical circuits are incredibly complex if you want to understand the very details by which electrons and currents are flowing. And in fact, I really encourage people to try to dig deeper into these apparently very simple systems that we have learned since, at the very least, high school. So on this, thank you for viewing the video, and see you in the next one.